Welcome to the Pander Brothers podcast, where we talk comics, movies, and cross-media storytelling.
Today we're dropping a special bonus podcast episode in celebration of Batman Day. In the early 2000s, we got the opportunity to write and draw one of the great comic book heroes of the 20th century. There was tremendous excitement coupled with a dose of terror as we set our creative sights on representing this towering cultural icon in the beginning of the new millennium. From our first foray into the world of the Dark Knight in Batman Chronicles number 21 with the Elseworlds short story Apocalypse Girl, to our 8-issue series Batman City of Light for DC Comics, we look back at creating stories about Gotham City during Y2K and in the tragic shadow of the 9/11 attacks on New York City, and how we navigated the influence of these global events while writing and drawing one of our childhood heroes, the Batman. Welcome to, I'd say this is kind of a special episode because it's the episode...
It's a special episode because there's a superhero...
A real bona fide superhero
involved is our guest.
The Batman.
He's in us. He's in all of us.
A little bit of Batman.
A little bit of Batman.
A little bit of the dark side, the Dark Knight.
Though we're going to talk about the Dark Knight. We're going to talk about Batman.
And basically, it's like all these projects. They always have this kind of strange set of circumstances that lead to their happening,
right? And the seemingly impossible suddenly is possible, and
it's that thing of like they talk about whatever an overnight success. It always appears like just something just happened, but it usually is the outcome of a lot of little things happening
right
over time prior to that. And the Batman projects were really the christening of the 21st century for us in the medium.
That's right.
And what was so cool and is that one of those Batman, the first one, really was very connected to New Year's Eve and
Y2K.
And Y2K. And so that was kind of like, again, getting to like the seeds of inspiration and just kind of the setting, what was going on. I mean, this was really the late 90s. It was 99. And there were all of these fears about Y2K, and so there was a kind of like this kind of like doomsday vibe around the potential. Because it was like, are all the nuclear power plants going to stop working? Are planes going to fall from the skies?
There was a concern about the clock, not being able to, that the system will shut down. And then it would create hysteria because it would be blackouts and any number of scenarios that nobody really knew until the clock struck midnight at 2000, 2000. Plus there was all of that, the year 2000. I mean, growing up in the
2000.
Exactly.
Okay, does anybody know that reference? Okay. Put it in the comments.
Please put it in the comments. But so basically we were cultivating new relationships with these other publishers outside of Dark Horse, and one of them was Vertigo, which was doing all this great counterculture type subject matter, and obviously Neil Gaiman came from there. And
it was kind of their alternative
Alan Moore, line. And I mean, there's so many great, their alternative comics line, and so we wanted to do something, with Vertigo, and there was interest in us because we were kind of coming at this sort of counterculture from more the American side, and even though part of it was in Amsterdam, there was a sort of just the tone of it, kind of political and kind of edgy, and so we were like, okay, let's figure something out, and so we were bouncing around ideas. Shelley Bond had said, throw me some ideas. I really like you guys' sense of fashion, and it'd be cool to bring some of those themes in, and so we were like, let's bounce around. So we were doing some brainstorming. Mm-hmm. We had some idea that could be a cool detective kind of character, almost sort of future noir, Blade Runner-esque type of thing. But we just didn't have the story. It was almost like the tail was wagging the dog. And so we had just written notes on some ideas and put them in the filing cabinet, right? Like, whatever. We'll come back to this. But we'd been there was another project that was a little bit in the works, but it was a year out or something. And so they were trying to find something we could do, maybe a short story or something. And so out of the blue, we get a call from Shelley that, hey, there's an editor, there's a situation that's arisen and they need someone to pencil. You guys draw, really fast, and can you guys draw a Batman book like in a week or in like 10 days or something?
We could draw that in a night. Come on.
I mean, we were like, one thing we've learned is don't say no. Just say yes, and we'll figure out how to pull it off. But
it was amazing. It was like one of those things where you're just like, oh my God, is this really happening? We're suddenly being asked to potentially draw Batman.
This is DC Comics. It's Vertigo, but it's also, down the hall we're up on the next floor as, Batman editors.
cool.
And so suddenly this opportunity was presented to us, and we were like, yes, of course. And so, well, yeah, because this book it supposedly had been drawn, but it's never
It hasn't arrived.
and they can't get a hold of the artist, and they don't know, and he's in Japan, and so it's this whole thing, right? And so we were like, send us the script. We, so pinch hit whatever in a bind and pencil this book. And so suddenly script arrives, FedEx to us the next day.
We start kind of gearing up to do this thing.
Gearing up, getting prepared. Okay, we got to read this thing and what's going on, and before we can even really
wrap
tape
our
down
heads.
the paper
Right.
on it's like suddenly we get the call like hold your horses. This is false alarm. Turns out the artwork was stuck in customs. This finished artist like sitting that this artist had delivered, but it was hung up in customs in Japan, I guess. So anyway, that all got sorted out. They got their book. They got it. Everything got out on time, and we were suddenly not drawing Batman.
Womp womp.
Right. And easy come, easy go. So we were suddenly, but the editor, who I believe is Joe Illage, and he that was very thankful that we were willing to come in and save the day, as it were. And we were happy to oblige, but we were, he was like, hey, I feel bad for you guys. And I edit this other book. I do this book called Batman Chronicles, and it's an Elseworlds comic. And the Elseworlds was a whole sort of idea where you could explore
Kind
Batman in a new,
not be bound by the
alternate reality Batmans, if you will.
right, by the established Batman kind of rules
Canon
and
or whatever.
norms.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think they did some pretty wild high concept Batman stories, like, he's a caveman or, whatever, like there were different weird tales of the Batman. And so we were like, okay, well, we might have something. And so, I'll give you guys the main story, because these were usually like 2, maybe 3 stories in one book. Suddenly we had like maybe, 15 or 18 pages to work with. And it was like, okay. And so, of course, like,
Now it's like, pitch me an idea.
now we got pitch me an idea. What's the story?
like,
Okay, we got to, come up with something. And so we were like, what, didn't we have some ideas of, and one of them had a detective, and Batman's a detective. Let's do something.
this cool, like, detective comics vibe.
Detective comics vibe. But high concept detective story. And we started bringing back some of the themes. And so anyway, we pulled that story out of the files and kind of went back into it. And I can't remember how far, but there were themes of it that we and I remember.
What I wonder is, like, did we in the original story, was the idea of this apocalypse girl in there? I feel like it may have been, but it was without Batman.
Right. So I think that was the fashion element. We had this idea. We did have an idea. There was a detective character that was trying to figure it out, but so in this story, there was these high concept elements, and of maybe a person or maybe a girl that was from an alternate dimension, and ultimately this alternate dimension was an antimatter dimension, and that when she came into our dimension, kind of paralleling to the same, in this case, Y2K, a kind of New Year's Eve tale. She enters into this sort of mystery, her father's science lab, and, goes through this
Some
random portal that's open because
Dad's building in the garage.
He's building in his lab, in his super high-tech other lab in the basement. He doesn't realize he's fallen asleep at the console, and oh my God, the calculations were correct, but he has no idea. And his daughter comes home from the rave, and she's still kind of on whatever they're taking in that dimension.
In that dimension.
Right.
Yeah.
And so she wanders into the portal thinking the party's still going on, and she arrives in Gotham City in this matter.
On New Year's Eve.
On New Year's Eve as, this antimatter DNA humanoid, and she goes and meets a boy at the goth club where everybody's kind of in their fetish Batman gear, and goes home with him. He takes off his latex, and as soon as she touches his flesh, he disintegrates. And enter the apocalypse girl. That was the kind of the setup.
The setup. And of course, the Batman is searching for, like, why? How are these bodies disintegrating? Who's the villain?
Who's this nefarious?
These murders happening in Gotham City.
Right. And so he takes a piece of her
remnants.
victim, but charred.
Brings it to the Bat Lab.
Brings it to the cave and studies it and discovers this antimatter element. And of course, alarms raise when suddenly fears that with the Y2K and the New Year's Eve happening in the kind of Times Square of Gotham, the equivalent, and of course the authorities are expecting she could show up here, and this terrorist act and could be happening, or any number of things, and here meanwhile this girl is just terrified,
Kind of just an innocent girl who's kind of freaked out and realizing, she's lost, and
because she's randomly wandering through the kind of lost
massive crowd and disintegrating
people are randomly getting touched by her or disintegrating. It's kind of dark. Whoops. And then she's shot by one of Gotham PD and from a sniper. And of course she gets hit, and then there's then the father comes to rescue his daughter from the other dimension, and he's in his protective gear and takes her away. And Batman has a sort of a wild theory, and he pulls off his bat glove, and he as the vortex is closing to the antimatter dimension, he throws his bat glove into this, not realizing what he might, but it's his last chance to save this girl, and the bat glove. He never knows. Maybe my matter in her dimension could have the opposite effect, but I'll never know. And so in the last panel, spoiler alert,
she's been healed.
She's alive, and kind of sleeping, holding on to the inside out glove. But that's the other thing we kind of had. Pulls the inside out.
Yeah, so his DNA
is exposed, on the inner side. And I remember you drew the kind of
the high-tech interior glove.
Right.
Wow.
So for real bat nerds out there,
you
can see what the inside of the bat glove looks like. At least in 1999. At any rate, that was our high concept story for Apocalypse Girl. And worth mentioning, on the cover, which is, we got to do the cover, which was great. And she's on this sort of the raver girl on the, pile of bones. And it's all sort of ominous, but there's sort of the bat symbol in the background, but really the city of Gotham is depicted, and,
really in a weird way, unwittingly, little did we know what was around the corner, and what was around the corner was 9/11, and on that cover, the background were the Twin Towers, and that was another shocking entry into the new century,
for everyone,
And I think also, interestingly for us, as we kind of encountered the next opportunity with Batman, this. It's kind of like, write what write the world that you're in. And, 9/11 was just searing in our mind in terms of just the kind of the raw emotion of it, the global implication of it, and then just the sheer horror of it. I mean, it was kind of like hard to even fathom.
I mean, it was kind of, for us, I guess, it was for our generation, like
the kind of Pearl Harbor of
that. Yeah,
of
it was
that
like
moment.
Pearl Harbor, and there was this big moment, the national moment, really international, that you knew was going to have implications, and it was just like this was just
for decades,
truly watching
to
an
come,
apocalyptic scene go down. And so we were, but we were kind of in this phase of like transition anyway. I know I was actually preparing to move to Los Angeles. I'd already, I'd already put money down on an apartment down there and on this bungalow in Hollywood, and that was in motion. And I was kind of trying to get all the duckies lined up, as it were, to actually drive down there with a bunch of stuff and relocate. And that was in, I was actually supposed to move September of 2001, and so actually I had to push that by at least a month to kind of, because everything was kind of in disarray, and so everything got canceled. Every job got canceled. Every project got canceled. Everything was canceled. Like whatever, and anybody who remembers that probably recalls how everything just went into like, okay, reset, and so there's pre 9/11 and there's post 9/11, and so that was a crazy timing, but it just sort of like, so suddenly driving down. I remember driving down to Los Angeles,
and there was
on Thanksgiving Day,
right,
or the day before Thanksgiving.
When 9/11 happened, they shut down all commercial air flight over the United States.
For that week or so, and that's right.
Yeah.
I remember there were like, you could hear F-16s flying overhead and whatever, but a month later...
People were terrified to get on an airplane.
That was right. So basically a month later, you had all these people, like the next big kind of holiday event was, Thanksgiving, and no one, there were planes, but nobody was wanting to book a flight, still terrified of what, what could happen, especially with the kind of heightened alert and just, I think people just imagining and just seeing what happened and imagining what the terror of being on one of those planes. No one wanted to get on a plane, and you can't blame anyone for that. So I found myself like driving, with all just stuff in my car and driving down I-5, like pretty much from the border of California to Los Angeles was like bumper to bumper traffic. It was
like a slow crawl traffic jam.
800 miles of, and then there'd be these pockets where it would open up, but it was mostly like being in LA traffic on I-5 all the way down. So it took longer to get down there. It was just, the whole thing was like surreal, and change was happening for us now living in two different cities, but we both, knew that, we had done this Batman story and really we should do something more.
Yeah.
There's more to be told. This is maybe the moment to really, to take on the Dark Knight and really do something that is significant. And Bob Schreck had become the editor at DC, so we did have somewhat of a connection now.
And we should kind of give a little background on Bob Schreck, a person who
and goes all the way back to
relationship goes all the way back to Grendel and Kimiko, which was in Norristown before he had moved to Portland.
He, started as a marketing person at Kimiko. Diana Schutz was the editor, and we were kind of, newbies. At Kimiko back then.
That was for the Grendel
project.
Was
for Grendel. And then, they moved, when Dark Horse, Kimiko went under, Dark Horse started really coming up. They became, both became editors. I think Bob was a marketing person first there, and then he eventually became an editor. And while Dark Horse was sort of having its kind of big, growth, at that time. And we ended up doing a number of projects, really mostly working with Bob, actually, I think, after, because Diana was so focused on Grendel. So, that kind of, so some smaller stuff, and obviously Dissident X, Triple X at the time. And so that relationship kept evolving and cultivating what was, and then Oni Press happens. We do Secret Broadcast, and he came to us for that, which was a real honor. His career's been amazing. I mean, he's always been on the pulse of kind of what's happening in indie comics, and really, I think, was a real influence and voice for indie comics, in mainstream comics, because mainstream books really were looking to a lot of the creators, and thankfully brought in a lot of great creators into their ranks and allowed them access to these legendary characters.
Yeah.
And
Bob was the editor at DC. He was a Batman editor at DC, and that was a really unique circumstance because it opened the door for us to pitch a longer form, more involved story, Batman story to DC. And in fact, we started talking, and he invited us, to pitch me ideas, guys.
Right.
So there we were, and we were kind of starting. We had been thinking about Batman ideas and developing concepts for it because that door had been opened. So I think that kind of opened up our own imaginations.
We had a shoe in now with the Bat world or whatever.
World.
Yeah.
And but kind of in this post 9/11 world, we started to, there were many themes that were happening in the culture, not least of which was the fact that, America was going to war. It was going to war with, an enemy that would kill civilians, as its opening salvo. And so I think America was kind of also dealing with its own identity and relationship to how it would respond to that.
Well, and it was at times
in a very dark way.
Yeah. And Right, and but there was that initial sense of a kind of bringing everyone together. I mean, I remember there was a kind of this real sense of patriotism on a social
level.
fabric level, but yes, there was this sense of like, okay, this is going to go somewhere. There's going to be revenge. There's going to be some kind of response.
Yeah.
What is that going to look like?
Yeah, and not to say that the story that we developed was some kind of variant of that, but I think that just in the conscious and subconscious, these themes and ideas of started to percolate about Batman and his own sense of identity and his own sense of his inner monster,
Right.
and what he was capable of, and where was that line between the man and the beast, the man and the bat. And I think one of the attractions to doing a Batman story is that it's inherently a psychological type of character.
Right.
I mean, it is a character, is the Dark Knight. He's a hero, but he is also this kind of dark figure that fights in the shadows of Gotham.
He's a vigilante. He doesn't have superpowers.
Kind of
He
operates
has
outside of the law.
technology, and yes, right. He lives by his own sort of
credo of justice and
right his own sense of purpose, and so that was a big part of it. That was like, okay, would be really great to kind of explore this, him being out of balance, or this sense of like this conflict, or something has some event that has led to him
thrown him into doubt.
kind of psychological doubt or turmoil. But also there was and again, these things were subconscious. I can't remember I don't really feel like we were consciously going, oh, let's draw these parallels. It was just sort of, I think, happening. It was where the state of mind was such that we were thinking about these themes. And the other theme I remember that was happening kind of organically was the idea of, the city, and here was New York that had just been bombed, one of the greatest cities in our country, that is just, which is a melting pot, is the world, is a totally international city, and is also this. I lived briefly in New York, and it's a huge city, but there's New Yorkers, it's just the community. It's just I felt that. I never really became a New Yorker, but I got a taste of that feeling, and it was just really palpable. And so the idea of those buildings coming down on an island, really, these people are all living together in this, on this island, and that the tragedy of that, and the pain of that, the pathos of that, but also the resilience and the bravery and the kind of how New Yorkers came together, and so I remember like that was kind of just happening in the culture, this sort of recognizing the pain of the citizens of New York, and that was kind of maybe in my subconscious. But I remember we were talking about, hey, wouldn't it be great to really do a story about Batman and Gotham City, and really do a story about making the city a character.
Yeah, exactly.
And that he has this relationship with, and that this tragedy that befell him as a child that led to him becoming Batman even was born out of this sort of the shadows and the dark side of this city, the side of the city that is inherently, flawed but is also his home, and is capable of greatness. And so and all of that is a reflection of him. And so, but also these themes of the city and your relationship to the city.
Yeah. And so that kind of brought this idea into like, well, what if we create this villain who is an architect?
Right.
And this concept of living architecture, or architecture that responds to people through computer technology, or just environmentally, ideas of like, floors with sensors that would be able to know when you're coming in, and by the way in which you walked across the room, or the weight of your body, it would recognize specifically it was you, and might change the temperature in the room to what you like, and
personalized,
this kind
customized.
of personalized architecture. Right. And that was kind of stuff. These were like kind of future concepts that were being talked about as possibilities in real architectural environments.
I don't think Siri existed yet.
No, it's like kind of, yeah. But these ideas kind of created this like, oh, just take that one notch further, this idea of living architecture. And we started thinking about this idea of like, what if the villain were kind of had this opposite vision of what Gotham could be. And he himself, we paralleled this kind of origin story of him
Nathaniel Slate.
Nathaniel Slate, the visionary architect, and his family was killed in a crime, and his response was different than Batman's, who was like, I'm going to take on one criminal at a time and just hunt them down relentlessly. The architect mind of Nathaniel Slate was, I want to eliminate crime by design. And he came up with this concept to essentially transform the Gotham skyline into a city of light, which is what we ended up titling the thing, and essentially eliminate shadows where crime could proliferate. So this luminous city,
that would eliminate crime by design. And so, and we should mention that, by the way, this was supposed to be an Elseworlds book as well. We were like, hey, we have
far out. We admit it.
We're going to be doing an Elseworlds book, so let's just be kind of far out and do something about architecture and kind of, I think if we knew that it was going to be part of the main storyline, we might not have gone this far and wild. I think we were kind of thinking it was going to be something far more high concept and out there, and gave us this latitude to be a little crazy with the whole theme, because I think we were still kind of in this mindset, like we're alternative comics guys, we're indie comics guys, we're indie filmmakers, we're not mainstream anything, and so the idea to suddenly, be doing this mainstream character was still kind of a little foreign to us. And so,
we had to bring our own,
which I think thinking that it was going to be their sort of alternate line,
gave us a little safety,
a sense of safety to be us, so that all of these concepts were born out of this sense of being kind of still counterculture. And with that in mind, we were kind of like, we need to kind of really, let's also take advantage of, obviously your love of architecture and interest in that, but also some of the themes of our own world, this underground art, like what, so basically the character of Batman and, this, he's conflicted because on page one, he's sort of, once again, hunting down a criminal or some drug dealers, and then he breaks up the drug deal in a fire, while this young kid on a skateboard is riding home or whatever.
Underneath his fire escape,
and it comes crashing down and crushes this child who's like now on life support, barely. This teenager who's caught in the middle, and so this is where
collateral damage. Yeah.
Right. And so Batman is sort of suddenly like, wait a minute, no, I'm part of the problem. I'm just another monster in this city. I'm part of, and so I've allowed myself to lose control. And so he's in this place of, I need to rethink myself. And he's also happens to be on the Gotham City architectural council board of directors, and he's being presented this vision by Nathaniel Slate of this city of light, and he's sort of going, maybe this guy's kind of onto something here.
Maybe my time is over. Maybe crime can be eliminated by design, but
exactly.
A little kooky.
But so he's like, but then he's invited to the next Bruce Wayne obligation to go see this art event, and there at this art event is this the new kind of hot kid artist, who's like who is Ron, who's basically
kind of created this new movement,
created part of this movement of this art co-op, essentially, kind of but he's really the de facto leader, and he's kind of created like a credo, sort of like called the Submergists, and
we are the Submergists,
and his painting these dark visions, and it's all these almost like cavernous, almost bat cave like imagery, but just with these dark eyes, and but you never really see the bat or anything, but you never see the monster, but just implications of this shadowy dark figure. So of course Wayne sees that and realizes, wait a minute, I'm seeing this. He starts to make this real visceral connection to these shadowy monster within, that is maybe waiting again in the shadows to do damage. And so he really goes into this phase of self-doubt, yet finds that there might be a way to. He buys one of the paintings, he sort of like becomes obsessed with one of these paintings that sort of he is almost like a mirror of sorts, and that begins to get this relationship with this underground artist kid
scene,
and
it turns out that this young artist basically wants to paint Batman,
right? And of course, that somehow in the there's a kind of a love interest character for Nathaniel Slate, who's kind of the rep for Ron and art dealer, and wants to make this connection and so and so there's these, and because Batman or Bruce Wayne has bought the painting, etc. So there's whole milieu of the art world and the underground art world and the establishment art world, which our father was has really navigated in our father Hank Pander
as an fine art painter,
and we grew up around that and oil paints and the studio. And in fact, one of the scenes is Ron is painting in his studio, kind of looking at the blank canvas, kind of going, I don't know what to paint next, and it's we just drew our dad's studio, or you did. But that being the kind of the again part of this milieu of like, let's bring in I think it made it less intimidating drawing Batman if we kind of
just
put him in our world,
put him
in the trappings of
and I think that's the cool thing about drawing such an iconic and universal character as a writer, artist, you want to bring your world into it. So Slate, his idea is just too wild, it's too big, and so it's turned down. Because of course he was like, well, we need to take down a whole bunch of these buildings to build my buildings and make them all.
It was a big idea,
a little outlandish. So they were like, well, we love what you're, thinking about.
And by the way, I should mention there is a Slate Tower. There's one, the prototype. His tower does exist.
Yeah,
in the midst of Gotham City is this one glowing tower.
building. But if we did the whole thing. So anyway, he gets turned down. Well, of course, that sets his little mind off. And these buildings start exploding, being blown up in the city. And now what was interesting is that at the time that we were doing this, 9/11 was still just incredibly fresh in the psyche, and it was kind of like
It was around 2002 we started writing this.
Yeah, and I remember we reached out to Bob, and we were just like, well, this is kind of the themes that we're dealing with, but is this just like too soon? Is this like too much? Is this going? It's just a kind of.
Is this in bad taste?
This is in bad taste. Is this not?
Yeah.
And Bob just said, guys, tell your story. And he reassured us, and it was great because it was, it allowed us to kind of get out of our own heads and put up walls for
Sometimes
ourselves.
you need permission. We do a pretty good job of giving ourselves permission.
Yeah,
but sometimes you need that. You need that objective because you can lose sight of, what. You lose perspective. So suddenly, with that being kind of us given that sort of free reign, it also kind of set up this new reality that Bob had, as we were developing the plot, which they liked. They liked the direction we were going. The general plot said, "Hey guys, look, this is really. We want to put this in the main canon. We want to put it in the main sort of storyline of the Batman universe, the primary universe, not the Elseworlds. So we're gonna, but you'll have to integrate some of these other characters that are part of that." Universe, these detectives and kind of reoccurring characters that were happening. So we were suddenly going, oh, wow, okay, this is no longer a crazy high concept. I mean, it is, but we have to really think of this as the part of the bigger Batman universe. And that sort of led to us bringing in another collaborator that we thought, hey, we need to kind of maybe bring someone who's even more kind of connected to understands the world of kind of more mainstream comics. And so we, there was another writer,
Mark Benicio,
living in Los Angeles, that we invited to collaborate as a co-writer on the project. So basically, becoming part of the main continuity of the Batman universe and all the books and how they're all connected, put more pressure on us and put more pressure on the story to really, be at the level it needed to be at. So
and also just fit all of the details, because I remember that when we were writing it, of course, we were tapping into all our own personal history of Batman. And then, some of those drafts we gave to Bob and Bob Schreck, and he was just like, okay, well, hold on a
There's
minute,
a new
guys.
bat signal or whatever.
Yes, we need to get you the Bat Bible. And they
right.
sent us the Bat Bible that got, it was like all of the stuff that was right current. This is the latest.
Here's the Batmobile, here's the cave, here's the bat wing, here's the batarang, and all of the all
which
those
was
details,
awesome.
Which was great, And I do remember we were still kind of like, yeah, but where's the opportunity to bring back some of the Batman, I guess the sort of the things that we grew up on with the Batman TV show and the kids,
I was
as kids
with the Adam West TV show when I was a kid, and all of it.
And our mom made us the Batman, and of course I was Robin, but
costumes,
the costumes, and we, and you wore yours to school. You were like,
man, I was serious
happy
about
camper.
This. Hello.
But I remember in this, there is a scene where they, because they have, that's what it was. The woman, the love interest who's part of the gallery and is connected to the museum, and it was a show on.
There was like the history of Batman.
There was a history of Batman
that the Gotham Museum had put on with all of the old
that she had been involved in, and so she still had the keys to the storage unit. So when she wants she wanted to essentially propose or approach Batman, find Batman, so that she could ask, hey, can we have this Ron wants to do your portrait. She took advantage of her access to this storage room and found the original bat signal. So this kind of old 20th century. The kind of metal bat signal.
They carted up to the roof
and turned on the bat signal, and lo and behold, Batman shows up, and it's this woman and this scrawny artist standing there, and he
proposing this
hey,
idea.
I'm gonna paint you, and Batman's like, what? You can't.
Right, it's like
he's livid, right?
Yeah,
and sort of reprimands them and is on his way, but it sticks with him.
Having grown up in the art world and having artist parents, we really want, and also just having been the founding members of this art co-op and having all these young artists around us for a period of time when we were in this co-op. We love the idea of the passion of the new young artist and the new artist wanting to kind of create their own new movement.
Right.
And so in this story, this guy, he's got this philosophy, this credo: to become the man, you must first become the beast. So he's created this entire kind of art movement around the concept of the submergists, where we have to kind of submerge ourselves into the darkness of our own soul, the journey into the dark heart. And
the submergists.
They're the submergists. So basically and this is this concept that attracts him to Batman. It attracts him to this figure that is almost like, it's just the iconic epitome of the beast and the man kind of living in this like extreme tension. And Batman himself is drawn to this young seeker who's trying to kind of explore the dark heart of the human soul. And Batman, because he's kind of yearning for this balance and this understanding, this kind of new self-awareness in this hour of questioning his own existence in the new Gotham. And in the modern society, has he gone too far? Is he relevant still? What is his place?
Is his MO legit?
Yeah. And so he's seeking,
or is he part of the problem?
Yeah. Or is he is he becoming part of the problem? Is he letting the beast take control? Right. Is he moving into this? Is his anger dictating and drawing him into this darker place, consciously or unconsciously? So all of these themes created the opportunity to flesh out these characters and create this young artist named Ron and create that world that...
Yeah, and essentially in the middle of the night, Ron awakens to the rapping at his window on a rainy Gotham night, and there's Batman, paint me. And at this point, he's kind of deep in the story. I think it's after the kid finally dies. The skateboard kid from the beginning... finally flatlines and he's like driven to the sense of like, I don't know where else to go. And so he shows up at Ron's at the art co-op in the middle of the night, paint me. And so begins this next chapter, this phase of really almost a conversation that begins between the two of them, this sort of, this dark, shadowy, the Dark Knight, and this kid who's really kind of like kind of laying into him a little bit, or giving it to him, his credo, and really drawing him out and presenting the definition of this credo that you already described. But that kind of all this relationship begins to form between them in this process, because it can be a bit therapeutic, and it's bonding. But he doesn't allow Batman to see the painting in progress. It's always this like, oh no, it's
mystery.
So we in the audience, we get little hints of it. We never get to see it. Like Batman, we're kind of left out of that. It's left a mystery until finally the nemesis, Purge, which is
kind of the alter ego of Slate.
Of Slate, finds out where Batman is, discovers his location in Ron's art space, whatever, and boom, Batman is blown out into the
kind of into
the night, into the river and the mud,
the edge of the city.
And so and this is after Ron has kind of described that to become in balance, that every man must face his monster, and and allow that monster to appear, to become realized in some way, so that they can look in the mirror, see the monster, and begin the process of finding a balance between the two. And so that becoming the credo, that becoming the sort of therapy, that when Batman never gets to see this painting, we never, at this point, we don't get to see it either yet. The painting isn't destroyed, but Batman goes into the
crawls into the
he kind of falls into the river and kind of crawls out
earth.
As this. He's sort of like the riverside is this creature now in the muck and the mire of Gotham, and he digs into the mud and essentially creates his own kind of bat cave of sorts. His own,
but this like metaphorical bat cave where he kind of gestates in the kind
toils.
Worm sodden
checks
earth.
Out.
He checks out.
But he has to go through that. He has to give in, just sort of, let go of all the control that he's had, and the monster is almost like let loose, but not in a kind of savage way, almost in a more psychological way. So he's really just allowing this gestation, like you say, to kind of unfold, and he's upside down, and the worms are creeping into his mask, and he's almost indiscernible between the monster and the mud. It's just and eventually, and the story kind of unfolds deeper, in the painting, and we finally actually see that the painting was actually that very image, this upside down bat
hanging,
painted almost in a kind of almost German expressionist sort of way, sort of distorted creature of the Batman, and eventually it's ritualistically burned by Nathaniel Slate, who's already kind of losing it himself. And anyway, so these were the themes, and I think in terms of the architecture too, there was also playing with these. There's a credo of architecture, and there's also a lot of history around architecture in terms of what is deemed beautiful, what is deemed worthy of being.
And oftentimes things that are really like super advanced things are considered ugly. So in a way, maybe Slate's vision of the world just isn't ready for it.
It was right. It was very ergonomic and almost sort of
almost like biological kind of like forms. It was,
but you're seeing a lot of it now, like Zaha
Hadid for sure. There's even kind of vibes of like Frank Gehry with his, his opera houses and these like
a little Sid Mead, some of that, but
a little bit,
but more. But it's true, more of this kind of organic kind of connection to nature. That we were vibing on.
What unfolds in the story is that he's actually used some of his own DNA in this architectural, in this phosphorously glowing material, but since he is this kind of twisted, demented, traumatized individual, that trauma is kind of finds its way into this living architecture.
Right.
And in a way, his subconscious is kind of interconnected with the materials in the buildings themselves. And so when he becomes threatened, the building itself reacts to protect him. And so we almost get this almost like a monolith monsters kind of thing.
A little bit. When this kind of ties back to, so this part of the story, we were like, okay, where are we going to take things from here? So the sort of Batman had gone through this process, and now the thing had to go next level. The monster of Slate and his creation and his alter ego Purge, which is sort of a humanoid version of himself, that we assumed was him in costume, but ultimately was the same science and bioscience that was kind of powering
reanimating this costume,
him, right?
But,
And so we were kind of in this place of like, how far can we take this? And Mark Panizia, who we'd brought on board to kind of work with me in LA to really lay this thing out and really
go from the plot to the actual issues and start to get the story
pacing and the dialogue and we were kind of wrestling with how far do we take this? How far can we go with this? And the great thing about Mark was he was also kind of creatively giving permission, almost egging me on, like, just go there, just keep going. And we're like, okay, let's just, how far can we take this? And so, yes, the idea that we'd establish this symbiotic connection between the architecture and the architect, and that that would become like this defensive mechanism, and that the building would ultimately come to life and begin to kind of defend itself like a in your body,
and also kind of start to expand,
white blood cells,
expand over the existing
being
Gotham
right.
City.
So first it's like spikes coming out of it, like taking out the Gotham PD helicopters and beginning to kind of expand and absorb over the other buildings and take over essentially. And so, but at that point, Batman is resurrects out of the earth as the monster, and it really is this sort of
kind of mud covered dark creature that's like going to take on this light, this luminous.
That he knows Slate's in there, and to get to Slate, he has to penetrate this glowing
monstrosity
monolith, right? So, and with the help of Batgirl, we haven't really gone into the Batgirl part of this, but she is kind of taking up the mantle of Batman throughout the story, and
while he's kind of off on the
off the grid, and so ultimately they kind of team up and infiltrate the building and take it to Slate and purge, and that's where the big climax takes place. But it ultimately was kind of, we were like, okay, are we jumping the shark, and we probably were, maybe to some degree, but
damn, it was fun.
We were like, let's just at this point, let's have a blast with this. And it's sometimes the story kind of goes where it wants to go, and you have to kind of keep it in the reins. And that's where we were also with Bob going, let us know. In a lot of ways, you're kind of given that platform, and it's a real rare thing. And that was our moment to do something really exciting, hopefully, with the character, and for us to kind of bring our voice to the character, and obviously,
to be inventive
and playful, and so that was our take at that one. I mean, there were other Batman stories that we wanted to do but that was the one that got us into the pantheon of Bat stories. And I should mention that the character of Slate does have to face his darkness too, and so there was a kind of a parallel between
kept that parallel going there.
And now we have a bad guy will always be part of the
Bat universe. Yes, we left our bad guy mark.
So anyway,
and basically we should just say that the book did come out as a series. It was never collected, but
it is actually
it's out there though. You can find it.
It came out in
2004?
2003 and 4, kind of through the bomb. And so this is technically we're in 2023. It's the 20-year anniversary.
20-year anniversary
this year.
Holy Toledo.
Later this year it will be, but
that's 8 issue series.
So that was that story had a lot of layers, and we'd love to see it as a trade, but it is kind of like the fans have to demand it.
That's right. But it was an absolute blast doing that book, and it was also really fun to just bring our world into that book, bring the world of these young artists and the interconnection and the conversation with Batman and the art world and kind of the way in which art and life interact. And I feel like that's kind of a theme, even with the creation of the books and the stories that we've been talking about, is how interesting it is to kind of see how how your experience in life interweaves with, the fantasy world that you manifest in story and art and visuals. And I think that theme plays out in Batman City of Light in those two worlds.
And everybody has their own story. And so that's what makes everyone unique, and that they can bring something new to a great character like Batman, is that there's, bring your story into that character, or any number of characters that already exist, because that's the beauty of it, is that your story is unique into itself, and that matters. That can have an impact. So, and also, and lastly, I would just say that we do have, Bob Schreck to thank for this, and
sure.
he was a real big part of this whole career in comics. From the beginning.
These are people that are really behind the scenes, that are oftentimes unsung,
right?
Other than within that industry. Certainly, a lot of people know who Bob Schreck is, but I think that these are the kinds of things that there's just these relationships kind of behind the curtain that go deep, they go long, and they really are part of the glue and the foundation of keeping a kind of creative career going, or any kind of career.
And when you're young, that's the thing, and your career is young, people go through each other, and it's not always a bad thing. It's just circumstantial. And so it is true to recognize those people that believe in you, or want to see you do more, and want to see you grow and develop, and to recognize them and try to keep cultivating that, because those relationships are rare and they're important, and they can really open up doors when you least expect it.
Yeah, for sure.
So thank you, Bob.
All right, thanks everybody for sticking around for this longer episode, but I hope you enjoyed coming along for the ride of the journey into the City of Light after the Apocalypse Girl.
That's right. What a world.
What a world.
What a city. Thanks a lot for joining us. So we'll see you next time.
Thanks for taking a journey with us into the heart of the Dark Knight. We hope you enjoyed this special bonus podcast episode in celebration of Batman Day. Batman is published by DC Comics. To get notified about new episodes, follow the Panda Bros podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and subscribe to watch it on our Panda Bros YouTube channel.